The Witches, page 139. "Hurry up," came my grandmother's voice from somewhere high up outside. "Grab the stuff and get out." I started skittering around and trying to search the room. This wasn't so easy. I couldn't, for example, open any drawers. I couldn't open the doors of the big wardrobe either. That's like a dresser. I stopped skittering about. I sat in the middle of the floor and had to think. If the Grand High Witch wanted to hide something top secret, where would she put it? Certainly not in any ordinary drawer. Not in the wardrobe either. It was just too obvious. I jumped up out of bed to get a better view of the room. Hey, I thought, what about under the mattress? Very carefully, I lowered myself over the edge of the bed and wormed my way underneath the mattress. I had to push forward hard to make any headway. But I kept at it. Perseverance. I couldn't see a thing. I was scrabbling around under the mattress when my head suddenly bumped against something hard inside the mattress above me. I reached up and felt it with my paw. Could it be a bottle? It was a large bottle. I could trace the shape of it through the cloth of the mattress. And right alongside it, I felt another hard lump, and another, and another. The Grand High Witch must have slit open the mattress and put all the bottles inside, and then sewn it up again. I began tearing away frantically at the mattress cloth above my head and with my teeth. My front teeth were extremely sharp, and it didn't take me long to make a small hole. I climbed into the hole and grabbed a bottle by the neck. I pushed it down through the hole in the mattress and climbed out after it. Walking backward and dragging the bottle behind me, I managed to reach the edge of the mattress. I rolled the bottle off the bed onto the carpet. It bounced, but it didn't break. I jumped down off the bed. I examined the little bottle. It was identical to the one the Grand High Witch had in the ballroom. There was a label on one, Formula 86, Delayed Action Mouse Maker. Then it said, "This bottle contains 500 doses. Eureka!" I felt tremendously pleased with myself. Maisie, come say hi since we're on video.
Hello.
Nope, in here.
Hello.
3 frogs. Go ahead.
Oh. 3 frogs came hopping out from under the bed. They crouched on the carpet, staring at me with large black eyes. I stared back at them. Those huge eyes were the saddest things I had ever seen. It suddenly occurred to me that almost certainly, once upon a time, they had been children. Those frogs before the Grand High Witch had got hold of them.
Oh.
I stood there clutching the bottle and staring at the frogs. "Who are you?" I asked them. At the exact moment, I heard a key turning in the lock of the door, and the door burst open, and the Great High Witch swept into the room.
The Grand High Witch came in.
Oh. The frogs jumped underneath the bed again in one quick hop. I darted after them, still clutching the bottle, and I ran back against the wall and squeezed in behind one of the bedposts. I heard feet walking on the carpet. I peeped around the bedpost. The 3 frogs were clustered together under the middle of the bed. Frogs cannot hide like mice. They cannot run like mice either. All they can do, poor things, is to hop about rather clumsily.
Oh, dear. Thank you for reading with me.
Do you want a sandwich?
I do not.
Okay.
Suddenly, the Grand High Witch's face came into view, peering under the bed. I popped my head back behind the bedpost. "So there you are, my little froggies," I heard her saying. "You can stay where you are until I get to bed tonight. Then I shall throw you out of the window, and the seagulls can have you for supper." Suddenly, very loud and clear, there came the sound of my grandmother's voice through the open balcony door. "Hurry up, my darling," it shouted. "Do hurry up. You'd better come quickly." "Who was calling?" snapped the Grand High Witch. I peered through the bedpost again and saw her walking across the carpet to the balcony door. "Who is this on my balcony?" she muttered. "Who is it? Who dares to trespass on my balcony. She went through the door on the balcony itself. What is this knitting wool hanging down here? Oh, hello, came my grandmother's voice. I just dropped my knitting over the balcony by mistake, but it's all right. I got hold of one end. I can pull it up myself. Thank you all the same. I marveled at the coolness of my grandmother's voice. Who were you talking to just now? Who were you telling to hurry up and come quickly? I was talking to my little grandson. I heard my grandson saying he's been in the bathroom for hours and it's time he came out. He sits in there reading his books, and he forgets completely where he is. Do you have any children, my dear? I do not, shouted the Grand High Witch, and she came quickly back into the bedroom, slamming the balcony door behind her. I was cooked. My escape route was closed. I was shut up in the room with the Grand High Witch and 3 terrified frogs. I was just as terrified as the frogs. I was quite sure that if I were spotted, I would be caught and thrown out over the balcony for the seagulls, too. There came a knock on the bedroom door. What is it this time? Shouted the Grand High Witch. It is we ancient ones, said a meek voice from behind the door. It is 6 o'clock, and we have come to collect the bottles that you promised us, O Grand High Witch. I saw her crossing the carpet towards the door. The door was opened, and then I saw a whole lot of feet and shoes beginning to enter the room. You have to remember his perspective is he's a mouse, so where he sees is very different. He's not seeing these great owl picture, he's seeing the feet. Come in, snapped the Grand High Witch. Do not stand there dithering in the corridor. I don't have all night. I saw my chance. I jumped out from behind the bedpost and ran like lightning toward the open door. I jumped over several chairs of shoes on the way, and in 3 seconds, I was out in the corridor, still clutching the precious bottle to my chest. No one had seen me. There were no shouts of mouse. All I could hear were the voices of ancient witches burbling their silly sentences about how kind your Grand Highness is, and all of the rest of it. I went scampering down the corridor to the stairs and up 1 flight. I went to the 5th floor and then along the corridor again until I came to the door of my own bedroom. Thank goodness there was no one in sight. Using the bottom of the little bottle, I began tapping on the door. Tap, 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 tap. I went tap, 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 tap. Would my grandmother hear me? I thought that she must. The bottle made quite a loud tap each time it struck. Tap, 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 tap. Just so long as nobody came along the corridor. But the door didn't open. I decided to take a risk. Grandmama! I shouted as loud as I possibly could. Grandmama, it's me! Let me in! I heard feet coming across the carpet and the door opened. I went in like an arrow. I've done it, I cried up and down. I've done it, Grandmama. Look, here it is. I've got a whole bottle of it. She closed the door. She bent down and picked me up and hugged me. Oh, my darling, she cried. Thank heavens you're safe. Formula 86 Delayed Action Mouse Maker, she read. The bottle contains 500 doses. You brilliant young boy. You are a wonder. You're a marvel. How on earth did you get out of her room? I nipped out when the ancient witches were coming in, I told her. It was all a bit hairy, Grandmama. I wouldn't want to do that again. I saw her too, my grandmother said. I know you did, Grandma. I heard you talking to each other. Didn't you think she was absolutely foul? She's a murderer, my grandmother said. She's the most evil woman in the entire world. Did you see her mask? I said. It's amazing, my grandmother said. It looks just like a real face. Even though I knew it was a mask, I just still couldn't tell. Oh, my darling, I thought I'd never see you again. I am so happy that you got away. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins meet Bruno. My grandmother carried me back into her own bedroom and put me on the table. She set the precious bottle down beside me. What time are those witches having supper in the dining room? She said. 8 o'clock. She looked at her watch. It is now 6:10. We've got until 8 o'clock to work out our next move. Suddenly her eye fell upon Bruno. He was still in the banana bowl on the table. He'd eaten 3 bananas and was now attacking a 4th. He had become immensely fat. That's quite enough, my grandmother said. I think it's time we returned this little fellow to the bosom of his family. Don't you agree, Bruno? Bruno scowled at her. I have never seen a mouse scowl before, but he did manage it. My parents let me eat as much as I want, he said. I'd rather be with them than with you. Of course you would, my grandmother said. Do you know where your parents might be at this moment? They were in the lounge not long ago, I said. I saw them sitting there as we dashed through on our way up here. Right. Let's go and see if they are still there. Do you want to come along? She asked, looking at me. Yes, please, I said. I shall put you both in my handbag, she said. Keep quiet and stay out of sight. Excuse me. If you must peep out now and again, don't show more than your nose. Her handbag was a large, bulgy, black leather affair with tortoiseshell clasps. She picked up Bruno and me and popped us into it. I shall leave the clasp undone, but be sure to stay out of sight. I had no intention of keeping out of sight. I wanted to see everything. I seated myself in a little side pocket inside the bag, near the clasp, and from there I was able to poke my head out whenever I wanted to. Hey, give me the rest of that banana I was eating. Oh, all right, my grandmother said. Anything to keep you quiet. She dropped the half-eaten banana into the bag, then slung the bag over her arm and marched out of the room and went thumping along the corridor with her walking stick. We went down to the lift, which is an elevator, to the ground floor and made our way through the reading room to the lounge. And there, sure enough, sat Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins in a couple of armchairs with a low, round, glass-covered table between them. There were several other groups in there as well, but the Jenkinses were the only couple sitting alone. Mr. Jenkins was reading a newspaper. Mrs. Jenkins was knitting something large and mustard-colored. Only my nose and eyes were above the clasp of my grandmother's handbag, but I had a super view. I could see everything. My grandmother, dressed in black lace, went thumping along the floor of the lounge and halted in front of the Jenkinses. Are you Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins? She asked. Mr. Jenkins looked her over. Yes, ma'am. I am Mr. Jenkins. What can I do for you, ma'am? I'm afraid I have some rather alarming news for you. It is about your son, Bruno. What about Bruno? Mrs. Jenkins said. Mrs. Jenkins looked up but went on knitting. What's the little blither been up to now? Raiding the kitchen, I suppose. It's a bit worse than that, my grandmother said. Do you know if we might go somewhere more private so I can tell you about it? Private? Why do we have to be in private? This is not an easy thing for me to explain, my grandmother said. I'd much rather if we were up in your room and sat before you when I tell you. Mr. Jenkins lowered his paper. I don't want to go to my room, ma'am. I am quite comfortable here, thank you very much. Kindly state your business and then leave us alone. He spoke as though he was addressing someone who was trying to sell them a vacuum cleaner. My poor grandmother had been doing her best to be kind to them as possible. Now she began to bristle a little bit herself. We really can't talk in here, she said. There are just too many people. This is a rather delicate and personal matter. I'll talk where I dashed well want to, madame, Mr. Jenkins said. Now come on, get out with it. If Bruno has broken a window or smashed her spectacles, I will pay for the damage, but I'm not budging out of this seat. One or two other groups in the room were beginning to stare at us now. Where is Bruno anyway? Tell him to come here and see me. He's already here, my grandmother said. He's in my handbag. She patted the big floppy leather bag with her walking stick. What the heck do you mean he's in your bag? You're trying to be funny, Mrs. Jenkins asked. There's nothing funny about this, my grandmother said. Your son has suffered a rather unfortunate mishap. He's always suffering mishaps, Mr. Jenkins said. He suffers from overeating, and then he suffers from wind, and then you should hear him after supper. He sounds like a brass band. They're talking about him farting. But a good dose of castor oil puts him right again. Where is the little beggar? I've already told you. He's in my handbag, but I do think it might be better if we went somewhere private before you met him in the state that he's in.